welcome to Revolution. It is Easter Sunday here at the big Revolution show. For those who've always asked, what's on the top shelf? There's the top shelf. The magical top shelf of Revolution. My Martin Luther King Jr. bust is up there. We should bring that down. But anyway. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're well. Welcome to another episode of Revolution. Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. I'm back. Sunday. So I have been. We went to Vegas and it was great. Great stuff. Good morning. We got a lot done there in Viva Las Vegas. Got some cool stuff signed up for and some stuff worked out that was really I couldn't do on my own, that my friend Brian Yarbrough helped me out. So if you guys were, wondering how that went, it went great. We got to go to the punk rock museum. And that was so cool. I was really worried that they weren't going to celebrate the earlier years too much, and they really did. They had it there, and it was good. So and it was good to catch up with Brian. I hadn't seen him in years. We've been friends for a long time, and he's always been there for me. But it was really nice to hug his neck and spend some time with him and catch up. So I have been, for the past, since I got back, I've been taking care of my kids, and my kids have been on spring break. So we have been going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs here for spring break, and I'm exhausted. The Easter Bunny came by the house last night. My daughter left out a plate of lettuce that spelled out Happy Easter in lettuce. And quite impressive, actually. The Easter Bunny ate all the lettuce and left quite a few fun things for the kiddos. So yeah, there we go. Another thing. So they're with their mom right now for a couple hours. Didn't realize their mom's going to be out of town this week, so I have the kids for another week. So I'm just a little bit tired, but I'm going to perk up here for you guys. Excited about the world, excited about Revolution. I'm not excited about the world. That was just came off. I'm excited about Revolution, but not the world, I'll be honest with you. This is another thing my friend Brian got for me. It looks just like a regular Solo cup, but look, ooh, I'm squeezing it very hard. It's a really hard plastic, looks like a Solo cup that a lot of us teens, when we were teenagers, drank alcoholic beverages before we were allowed out of these. I remember one time we threw a kegger and we sold, we had red ones and blue ones, and they both meant something different. But when the mom came down and shut us down, and someone, I think, dropped a cigarette on the carpet, we had to take all the money that we earned and give it to the mom to fix the carpet. You party, you pay. A very wise woman named Carlene Julian told me that. You party, you pay. She would often clang the like a pot in a pan, pan, and a spoon. Early in the morning, after she known that I'd stayed at their house one summer. She knew I was out partying late. She go, "You party, you pay. Time to wake up and do some chores." And we did some chores, all right. Well, I did. Her son Bo seemed to always figure a way out of it. I had a genuine fear and respect of Carlene. So it is Easter Sunday. If you know me, I am not a guy who does holidays. I do not like to preach on the holidays or speak on the holidays. Not really ever been that guy. Not like, oh, I'm a rebel. It's just I really like to go through things when I'm feeling inspired and like they're what they need to do. But we will touch a little bit maybe about the resurrection today. Oh, so here's something cool I can share with you all. I always get asked questions about my dad. So when I was flying back home, I got a call from my dad on the airplane, and I was so shocked to get a call from my dad, and that I left my suitcase on the plane. I had a layover in San Francisco to get back home. And by the time I was on the phone with my dad, talking to my dad, and talking to my dad's always strange because there's, he says a lot of nice stuff, but he also says some stuff that's kind of like, I hope you're not a heretic, and I hope you haven't been led astray, but I'm proud of you, and there's just very mixed emotions. And so my emotions are kind of everywhere. And as I walk 5 miles to the next plane, I get there and realize that I don't have my bag with me, and they can't contact the place. They can't contact the last flight. On the phone with my dad. He seems to be doing okay. He's had 7 strokes in the past year, which is not good. But we had a conversation. We're going to try to get together for him to see the kids, which I'm excited about. It was nice to hear from him, as soon as I saw he called, I called him back because we don't talk that much. And we certainly disagree on a lot of things, but I try not to focus on that, and I try to take the kind of backhanded comments is the only way he knows how to love sometimes. But he did say some nice things to me, and those I hold on to. It's kind of like in the 12-step program, they would often say, take what you need and leave the rest. And that's what I did. Plenty of room for that. Because when you've lived through that kind of hell and confusion and that type of things, nobody comes out healthy. Nobody comes out perfect. Nobody comes out the way you want them to, And that's when you kind of have to make that decision of am I going to just love, or am I going to just shut things down? And I've tried to always choose love, even with boundaries, always have a little door in the boundary. So anyway, so I forgot my suitcase, and then no one could find it. I had lost and found. And I got a call from Hawaii, not kidding you. And they go, we just have a bag here, and we just saw a tag and just called the phone number on the tag. I'm like, you've got my bag, but like the rest of United didn't know where my line was, but the lost and found in Hawaii had it. So my luggage had a better trip than I did, basically. And I'm pretty sure it's angry that I found it because now they're FedExing it back to me. So anyhow, that was my story. I did a little talk from Las Vegas at really late night. And I don't usually do late night talks because I'm exhausted. And now I'm exhausted doing a morning talk. But I'm going to touch a little bit on that, a little bit on what I talked about in Corinthians. Because that just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, this is something I just need to get down and record. And that's one of the great things about liking and subscribing. And if you turn on the notifications for the Revolution channel, anytime I throw something up like that and get a little inkling, you will get it. It'll go boop, boop, boop. And you're like, oh, Jay's putting the video up. And you can watch it live. Sometimes they're live. Sometimes I just record them and throw them up there. But that one, I believe, pretty sure was... Maybe it wasn't live. I can't remember. Anyway. So we've been in Galatians, and I'm going to start in Galatians, but I'm not going to count this as a part of Galatians because this is going to be me being a broken record. You guys hearing the same thing over and over and over again. And why, Jay, do you keep telling us the same thing over and over again? Because we've got to get it. And you say, Jay, well, I've got it. Then you've got to pass it on, and you've got to pay it forward, and you've got to share these talks, and you've got to share these messages with other people. And we've got to get this out there, and we've got to let people thinking that the power of difference is that the difference is just such a reality of humanity. People are different. People are unique. People are born in different places, and that's all an accident by birth, and that should not keep us separated. That should not cause us to treat each other less than, and we should always be striving for unity through diversity. That is a big part of what we talk about here at Revolution, and I think that's a big part of what the church talks about and what Jesus was telling us about and what the Apostle Paul's told us about, and somehow we've gotten a million miles away from that and use these same folks to justify a religion and a legalism that keeps us separate. That not only keeps us separate, but allows us to look at the least of these and see them treated horribly and somehow think that that's somehow okay. And that we've allowed to compromise and allowed the government and the law to be before us, and somehow we've created these idols out of the jackass and the elephant. And I'm always trying to remind us that we can't have these can't be idols if you're going to follow Christ, if you're going to follow Christianity. If that's going to be what you subscribe to. I know not everybody who watches Revolution does subscribe to those ideas, but they often tell me, hey, I don't believe in that stuff, but I like what you're saying. And so even them are saying, like, we'd rather have love above these idols. You know, we see right now what the Republican administration is doing with people, with people who they say, well, they don't belong here, and people who are trying to legally be here, you know, and it feels like it feels scary and it feels terrifying, you know, all the immigration stuff that's going on. But you know what, you have to also, like I always say, we can't scapegoat one another. We can't just scapegoat the groups. We also have to like realize, like, but Obama's administration spent $18 billion on the same stuff. We just didn't see it in our faces every day. And so we have to ask our questions, what are the differences of these folks? But also, like, you know, we have to be open to going like, okay, injustice has always been here. And the reason I say that we can look at that is I think it makes us better at arguing if we're able to say, hey, listen, you know, the Democrats have done this, Republicans have done this, and what we're saying is there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way with more compassion and more grace and more love. And just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That's how I was worried about. I mean, I was a lifelong Democrat, and one of the things about the Democratic Party that worries me is sometimes they're just better at keeping quiet the stuff that we don't want to see. You know, the deportations that we don't want to see, and that type of stuff. And this administration seems to think that it's the thing to march around. But both are horrific. Unfortunately, it often takes human beings have to see something in order to be willing to change something. The civil rights movement became a lot more popular when people were able to look on the cover of the newspaper or turn on their television and see the conflict and see how, you know, our African American brothers and sisters were being treated by the Southern police and by the attack dogs and by the, you know, these folks and the prices they were paying, and say, okay, this is injustice. So hopefully we'll speak up for injustice, but remember that it's been injustice even when we haven't seen it. We just have out of sight, out of mind, and we have to be aware of that. That's something I think that's very important. Because it's very easy to be a hypocrite. It's very easy to scapegoat others. It's very easy to sit up and be like, well, you know, kind of a virtue signal. Well, my group never did this, or we never did. You know, we've got it all together. And I know we lost a lot of folks last year when I was really given a hard time to the Biden administration for some of this stuff and for the war and things like that. And some of my more, you know, nervous Democratic brothers and sisters said, well, we can't, you know, this race is too important. We can't have you talking negative. And so, but my call is I'm always going to be for the least of these. I have to do that. That's kind of what my work has called me to do, and that's what I do with my work. And I'm sorry if it stepped on your feet. I hope some of those folks come back and rethink that stuff, you know, and go, okay, you know what? We got to have honest conversations. I understand why some of those folks feel like their loyalties lay there and things like that, but it's also heartbreaking. And one of the people when I was out of town, I reached out to, I'd speaking at their church, and and didn't hear anything. So it's tough that when we allow these things to divide us. But I guess life is short, and so some people just have their reasons, and that's okay. But I'm going to read. Last week, the week before, we ended on Galatians 3, and then the following week I did Galatians 3:28, and so this will be the third week in a row where I'm reading Galatians 3:28, and that's again the reason I'm being a broken record right now. Is not because I don't have anything to speak of. Well, being honest with you, I felt like what we needed to read, what comes next after that, is a bit tedious. And it being Easter and being so much going on in the world, I thought, well, what, I'm not feeling this. Is there something that more I need to say? And so, yeah, I kind of did something and brought something together. But I also think we don't get it. And then Galatians 3:28, again, is this. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male and female, for you are all one in Christ. And you can say that there is neither Jew or Palestinian. You can say there is neither Republican or Democrat. There is neither black nor white. There is neither straight nor gay. We're all one. Now, does this mean that we ignore each other's differences? Of course not. You know, we don't do that. Does that mean, oh, I'm colorblind? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that we have to remind ourselves that we are brothers and sisters, that we are one. When we follow Christ, that your neighbor is everyone you see around you. And we're going to dive into that here in a little bit. But I think we can't get this enough. This is not an old Jewish prayer. The Jewish prayer that people use often to say, oh, he was just quoting an old Jewish prayer. He didn't mean that literally. I like when literalists have to explain the good stuff is not literal. That's always interesting to me. So it was an old Jewish prayer. And so I researched that years ago because someone had said that to me. And then I realized that prayer was written after the Apostle Paul's life. So it is an old prayer. It's just not as old as this saying here. So that didn't work. It didn't work. So if you hear apologetics that seems suspicious, just do a little research. Often you go, oh, I find that that's kind of the weakness with apologetics, is often there's not a lot of research that goes into it. It just, oh, this works. Let's use it. So that's mine. And it says you belong to Christ, you're Abraham, offspring, heirs according to the promise, which is the promises that Abraham would admit. We're all sons and daughters of Abraham. So that we live in a time where, I saw a tweet, and I'm not on Twitter anymore, or whatever it's called anymore, X, but Shane Claiborne posted a text or tweet from Donald Trump, and it was just really awful because it was like all these liberals and blah blah blah, and it was really like heavy. And so we really do right now have I feel like party politics are always kind of this way, but it was really heavy-handed of like, well, I'm not here for the liberals, and the liberals are the problem kind of thing. And to all you liberals, and and it's just so we're in a time where we're just super divided. The president's divided. Everybody's divided over what's happening in America right now. I think more people are going, like, waking up to seeing that there's a lot of horrific things happening in this country. And so we live in a time where, even the president is saying, I'm only here for half of the people of the country. Only half, I'm really the president for only half the other citizens here because the other side is the problem. And that's really bad division, and that's really a scary place to be. It's like if we're not divided enough through like identity. The left often uses identity politics and things like that, and that keeps it separate. And then the right also does identity politics, but now it's just getting to like the point where it's like your identity is based on your political thinking. It's just. To me, that's a very dangerous thing, because we're not thinking that there's neither Jew nor Gentile, neither Republican or we're all one. So we have to have conversations. So we have to treat each other well. So we have to work these things out. But instead, it's like we create enemies, and we're creating enemies out of one another. Thank goodness that there's answers to what we do with our enemies Jesus talks a little bit about that, and we'll look at that here in a few minutes too. But I just felt like we needed to continue to be in this space of realizing that, diversity is an accident of birth. Even our political diversity can be an accident of birth. You know what I mean? I was raised in the South to this and that, or I was raised as a Christian, or I was born in this country and I was raised in this way of thinking. I was, have friends who are Europeans, and they're like, you don't have any liberals in your country. Even your liberals aren't liberal, So you hear a lot of that kind of stuff. And so you have people who are born in different places, raised different ways, who think different things. So it's not just about skin tone and sexuality and things like that, but these are all these kind of like, this is where you happen to be born, this is what's happened. And I love that John Hume always said, where you're born is an accident of birth, And so it should never be a reason to divide us. And unfortunately, we've made it these reasons for division. Like, oh, unknown, it's so different, you scare me. You ever remember Caveman Lawyer on Saturday Night Live? Your ways frighten me, you're giant metal birds. I'm just a humble caveman lawyer. And I feel like sometimes we often act like, I can't understand, and so it's really ridiculous. But let's, Corinthians 13, when I was talking about that last week when I did that late night Vegas thing, and it's so funny because I said Galatians 13, because I obviously had Galatians in my mind, and then when I wanted to talk about the Good Samaritan, I was like, the prodigal son. I was really tired, but I had to get up and talk to you guys about that stuff. I'm going to read that Corinthians 13 for you again. And if this, this is fine. I'm fine with being a broken record at this point, because we really have got to get this kind of stuff. It's got to be foundational. It really has to be foundational in this system of following Christianity and Christ. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic power to understand all the mysteries and all the knowledge, and if I have all the faith so as to move a mountain, but I do not have love, I am nothing. You can almost look at that thing as like people who are like mega preachers or mega wealthy people or things like that. Like, I do everything, I can move mountains, I can do all this, but it says, without love, you have nothing. This is the Apostle Paul saying that. You could know all the mysteries, you could be the greatest speaker in the world, you could be like Rob Bell +5 and still not love, you'd be nothing. If I do not have love, I am nothing. If I gave away all my possessions, and if I handed over all my body so that it may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. So you could be Shane Claiborne ×5 or Mother Teresa ×, And without love, this is worthless. It's just actions works. It's just, okay, but what about love? And Paul goes into explaining to us what this love is, and you've probably heard it more times than you want at weddings. And I think this is really a crazy, like I had this read at my first wedding. And to be honest with you, I don't think I'd have, if I ever got married again, I don't think I would have. It's a tall order, folks. It says love is patient. And this isn't even talking about romantic love, but it's more of agape love here. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. Do you hear all those things? So often I see that even in myself when these type of arguments of differences come up, especially in political differences and type of things like that. It's very easy to be arrogant and rude. It can be a fine line. Sometimes I try to be silly to kind of disarm the whole situation, but it's easy to do. It does not insist on its own way. I mean, could you imagine that? I've always thought about growing up in Christianity in the Assemblies of God most of my life, and then some Baptists, First Baptist in Orlando, I went there for a little while. Luckily, I ended up in the Cathedral of the Holy Spirit in Atlanta, Georgia. That was a lot different. But before that, and all through my high school years, you know, it was always this kind of one thing I knew about church is that it demanded a way that I must live and I must act and I must be. And I remember the first time I read this verse, I was just, and I was also just finding out about grace, and I was just shocked. I was like, love doesn't demand its own way, but I thought that's all the church did. I thought that's all Christians did. I thought that's all politicians did. I feel like that's what all, schools do. I mean, that's the whole system is kind of just demanding, demanding, demanding. And this seems so radically different than that, but it does not demand its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. Those are two also that seemed strange to me. I thought those were parts of love, to be honest with you, or parts of at least religion. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Endures all things. So when people say, well, why do you do this with your father and blah, 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 why do you stay in touch with him when, he says these things and we've heard this and, somebody sent me a clip picture of him and he had a Trump hat on. Oh, why do you do this? I'm like, love endures all things. He's my father. This is someone that I have a reason and a passion to care about. There are so many nuances there. The time we spent together when he was in prison, where he's at now, who I knew him as when I was a young boy. He's the grandfather of my children, And when you start looking at people like this, and you start seeing the nuances in their lives, when I was with my friend Brian this past week, we were talking about the nuances of how many people in our lives who were like, these really conservative folks, but they came into a moment and helped our lives and were there, and they could sometimes really only be able to love those in front of them. Sometimes it was harder for them to broaden that out, but still there was a love there that we saw. And so I think sometimes our job with people who have kind of a narrow concept idea of love is to stretch that love. And this talks about it, and Jesus talks about that as well, and about that type of particular love that's kind of just focused on, well, I just love the people around me. It's not going to go great for you if that's your motto. I mean, it's fine for you, but it's not what Christ calls us to. Christ calls us to something a little bit greater than that and a little bit more open to that. The problem is that sometimes I find people in religion find ways to kind of create a counterfeit love. And, well, no, I'm telling you this because I love you. But then you start to go into love demanding its own way and it being resentful and it being irritable, and you start to really see that come out. I used to, like the Calvinists in the early 2000s really didn't like me, especially because when I became affirming, I kind of hit their radar, and they would say all this stuff and I was like, that's awful. How could you say that to anybody? I'm saying this because I love you, brother. I remember some of the folks, when my mother passed away, and my wife and me divorced, and all in like just a few weeks' time. I found out my wife was leaving. My wife had an affair the same week I found out my mom had died. And I was just like, what's happening to my life? And some brothers and sisters in Christ said to some of my coworkers, well, God has taken his hand off of Jay. God's taken his hand off of Jay's life and his ministry. And I thought, wow, that's okay. So that's what you think happens is when God doesn't agree with your theology, by taking his hand off, your mom dies and your marriage falls apart. It was just God's hand keeping her alive and God's hand just keeping my marriage together. That's just absolute nonsense and crazy and kind of cruel. It's just like, oh, that's what happens when you don't say the right thing, preach the right doctrine. Like, who's got the issue here? More the person who's going through it or the person who says that, And so we've got to be really careful of that counterfeit love that comes in and tells us, because there is that love that flips the tables over, but it's flipping the tables over because it's saying it's not just these people. It's not just you guys who are included who are selling these indulgences and these things. Everyone's included, and you're excluding them, and you're making it impossible for them to get into the kingdom. But that table flipping is also to grab their attention just as much as it is everybody else's attention, to say, wake up. Good news is for everyone. Yes, you're loved, and they are loved too. You can't make it impossible. You can't become this like kingdom monitor. You can't become who gets grace and who doesn't. You don't get to choose the free gift. It's a free gift. You are included. You don't get to say who's included and excluded. So there is times where you have to speak truth to those folks and speak truth to power. And sometimes that's not pleasant, but you have to ask yourself, am I telling, is this true love? Is this Corinthians 13 type of love? Or is this a love that is something that I'm trying to mold and make so they agree with my theology, or because they're doing something I don't like, and so I'm going to manipulate this to hurt them? And I would say if you're someone's telling you, well, they died because they didn't have enough faith, or this type of thing, that's someone who needs some help. That person needs more help than you. You need to just like, oh, thank you, and walk away and pray for that person and hope that their hearts change, or become their friend and help them change their heart, because that kind of message is really a problem. It's not necessarily the people. It's all easy. I think we've all fallen into moments where we felt that way or thought that way. Not all of us, but a lot of us have. That's why you see so many people deconstructing. But I think it's valuable to important to realize that, none of us are beyond being there. In AA, it used to be when you'd see someone go out and drink, you'd almost be like, by the grace of God go I, like that could be me. And I think that's another good way to see it, as I could be manipulating the scriptures to control and hurt other people as well. And I think when we speak truth to power, that is more of a revelation and more of a way of saying, we've got to wake up. We've got to see this. We're missing something. Not, better get in line. But that's just my 2 cents. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. And that's really tough when you're the one who needs to do the enduring. People really loved it when I did this back in about 2005, 2006, 2007. I would say this is, I would talk to LGBTQ folks, parents and families and friends. You've got to endure love. You've got to stick with them. You can't just say, kick them out of your house and do all that. People like that. But then when you go like, okay, you're conservative family, you got to love them and you got to pray for them. And you got to have good, you got to endure. Oh, Jay, but I'm, that's the buts start coming in. And you see a lot of that on different reasons. When it becomes tough, but this isn't easy. And that's why Paul's putting this here. He's saying, I could do all this stuff, but without love, I could do nothing. In some ways, he's saying, it would almost be easier for me to move mountains than to love this way. But this is the goal. This is the way. Love never ends. But as for prophecy, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put away childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, that I will know in fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide. These three are the greatest, and the greatest of these is love. And what I think is very interesting about this is I used to think like a child and act like a child. And I would hear people like, oh, he's just on milk. He's just a spiritual baby. He's not ready to eat meat yet, And often that means like, oh, they're making mistakes, they're doing this thing, or they're being too radical. And what this is saying is like, yeah, I used to think like a child. When I thought like a child, I thought the big deal was moving the mountains and giving everything I had and sacrificing my body. But I didn't realize that all of that was kind of just clanging noise unless I loved others. So what he's saying is when you see more fully, and how I said, sometimes we just love those in our vision stuff and a little bit on our peripherals, but he's saying love more. If you want to see more fully, if you want to grow more fully, if you want to see more fully, love more. Because love is going to be the consistent. Love is always going to be there. You know, I can disagree with you, and I can agree that that disagreement will stay until one of us changes our minds. But I can also at the same time agree that love will be there. Now I can hear some of you already saying, well, if it has anything to do with this, this, or this, that's okay. You can have your lists of what that does and does not cover. But for me, there are things in my friendships and people I know that are negotiable and that are okay. We don't see eye to eye on that. We can still love each other, and that goes on too. I think that also says a lot is when we're really quick to jump into an area that maybe stings for us to be like, well, I won't do this. And I would say as soon as you put in conditions of love and relationship and things on something, it's time to look at that and ask yourself why and go, what's going on within me that I don't feel secure enough in this area to love someone who doesn't like this area? Because you might be that person who changes them. I've seen more change happen in people's lives through relationships and through just being in rooms with people and spending time with people than all the knowledge in the world, than all the great sermons, even moving mountains and great stuff like that, and all the commentaries and all the great theology and all the great tapes. I've seen more change of people recognizing one another's humanity and having a bigger change in their lives through one-on-oneness than anything. So when you say, well, I won't do this, I won't be this, you might be robbing that person of the freedom they need. You might be the person who's going to help them go like, oh, I can love my LGBTQ brother and neighbor. I can, put away my racist thoughts. I can disagree with these political thoughts. I can stop scapegoating. You might be the person who does that. And I read about it countless amount of times in, when I'm reading about Martin Luther King and I'm reading about the Poor People's Projects and I'm reading about all these different things, and you hear about it when I've been with Soul Force I've seen it happen firsthand, so this isn't just some sort of concept that I think might work. This is something I've seen work time and time again. I just recently on Revolution Instagram shared a letter I got from somebody apologizing for being so angry at me for what I believe about LGBTQ people and being so cruel to me about it. And he said, I realize I was wrong and I want to apologize because I agree with you now. And I will say there have often been the cruelest people. I've had people stand up and scream at me in the middle of talks and literally write me letters weeks or months, years later saying, I was that guy who yelled at you. I was the person who rebuked you. I was the person who walked up to you at Cornerstone and read the riot act to you. I was that person, and I want to say I'm sorry, and I'm now understand what you were saying, or, I was struggling with it, and you kind of helped put that last straw in there, but it broke me before I could accept it. So you never know what's going to happen, because change does happen. People do change. But it's patience. I think that's why patience is a virtue. I think that's why patience is a fruit of the Spirit. Is because that time takes, that's why it says love endures all things. I can remember it was at, oh gosh, what was that when this kid started just yelling and just laying into me? It was at Youth Specialties. I had just given a talk, and then you do a post Q&A in a separate room, and this guy just laid into me. And everybody started to go, I said, no, let him speak. And I had that sense like something's happening with this kid. And a few months later, I got a letter from him, So those things do happen, folks. And I hope that gives you a little hope in your own life. One of the things, like I was on the phone with my father just recently. He said, son, I'm so grateful you stuck by me through the prison times. And he hasn't said that to me in a long, long time. And he goes, and I love you and I believe in you. And, he also said the stuff about worried about my theology and all that stuff. But I hadn't heard him say I love you and I believe in you in a long time. And it meant a lot to hear from him. And not that we haven't had tough conversations, because we have. And I've said some really honest things to him. But, that happened. If I had said, wow, I'm not answering that phone call, I'm not talking to that man, I wouldn't have heard those things. even in his old age and with 7 strokes, and his voice sounded so kind of like wavy and weary and older than I've heard him before. There was still that kind of thing of, okay, those moments are still there. Those moments are still valid. That love is pushing through all the bullshit and all the legalism and all the difference in theologies and ideas and politics. That's still there. That's still a very strong force. I always think of the end of the Empire Strikes Back, the Return of the Jedi, and you hear Luke go, like, there's still good in him. There's still good in Vader. I can still feel it. It's still there. And ultimately it is there. And that's where we go with that film. Spoiler alert. If you haven't seen a film that's probably about 40 years old, he comes back to the good side. And he throws over the Emperor. And I've seen the Emperor get thrown over a lot by a lot of different people in my life. And I think that's worthy of being said and worthy of being known and discussed. So when I say diversity, when I say, so sometimes it's just your own family, But we live in such a world right now where everybody is so hot, so going through so much that, but I swear people are going to start getting tired of what these things the president's doing, and people are going to start to get hurt, and people are going to start to feel, and when your conservative brothers and sisters are starting to feel like they're going to be waiting to see, and if you're sitting there going like, I told you so, which a lot of people, oh, that's who you voted for, that's not going to do much. That's going to make you feel better. But if our work is really to help change people's minds and change people's hearts and help people think in a different way and be more inclusive, then we're going to say, hey, I get it and I understand it. Maybe later you can say, hey, I saw it before you and this is why or this is what. But, we act like forgiveness and grace, it only worked for us. And now we have to go around going like, oh, you should have been here earlier. That's just not how it works. That's not how you build a movement. That's not how you build a group. That's not how you build community. That's not how you love the other. If you sit there and go like, oh, it's too late. Oh, you should have known better. Oh, look at you. It's your fault. You're missing the point. Especially if you're saying like, well, I follow Jesus. You're missing the point. You're just a Pharisee. You're just a legalist. You're like the people that they're arguing with in the book of Galatians. You're going, oh, you can't be a real Christian unless blah, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's what you're saying. And you need to be aware of that. And we need to be aware of that with others. But I love this, like you could do all these great things, but you're just making noise without love. And that's what I just want us to always constantly kind of check in with ourselves. Am I just making a loud noise? I had somebody recently say, oh, I see you're raising a lot of money, but what are you raising money for? What, your paycheck and this and that? I'm like, well, my paycheck's one of those things. We got to pay the bills. The people who write the paycheck. I said, we're really on bare bones right now, but often they don't see this concept if you're trying to encourage people to come together, if you're trying to encourage people to unite and stuff. It's not like, oh, that's not worthy of, you need to do more, you need to say more, you need to do, and there's always this kind of strange, like, demand of you got to do this, like bringing people together, reminding people to show grace and live grace. Sometimes doesn't seem like that's good enough. Anyway. And I'm saying like, well, I'm just loving with all my heart. Well, loving with all your heart is not, I'm trying to get people to love each other. Well, that's cute and nice, but what else you doing? I'm like, well, I'm working 4 other jobs, so does that help? It's a strange world we live in. And I don't always get it. I'm going to jump over to Matthew, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Matthew. I'm going to try to be done here in about 15 minutes so I don't keep you guys all day long. I know these talks are long, but this is the time I need to kind of focus on sharing some of this stuff with you. But I'm going to jump over to Matthew. And all these scriptures are things that I usually always do through the years anyway, and you've probably heard, and you're probably going like, he's just always got the same message. And you're right, it is the same message. It all really boils down to grace, and that you are accepted and that others are accepted, and loving one another. And until that becomes something that we're hearing on more of a regular basis, I will continue to be a broken record and be happy to be a broken record. If you feel like, well, I've got it, well, then great, then go somewhere else and take it. Share it. If that's in their foundational belief system. I mean, I think that was one of the things that was so incredible about my mother, is that I always felt like she had this just really good foundation of just loving people. And I was, she may have not been a theologian by any stretch of the imagination, but she loves people, and she's had films made about her, plays made about her, documentaries made about her, books written about her. And, it's because she loved people. She gave people hope. She could be silly, she could wear a lot of makeup, she could be a televangelist, all the things that are frowned upon, yet people felt accepted by her message and by her words. And that can be you too. You can be the outcast and the one person that doesn't change when everybody else is telling you to change, and you keep telling people that they're loved and that they're accepted, and you've helped them find peace with themselves. That's great. The next step is helping them find peace with others and love others. And that was the thing, is I don't think my mom ever met an enemy. Even when people would say the most horrible things to her, she would always strike back, well, honey, God loves you. Or, oh, let me introduce myself. You don't know me. Like, my name's Tammy, blah, blah, blah. All this kind of really interesting. And it would drive me crazy as a teenager, because I just wanted to, go to war. Let's fight, and or wait for her to walk away and really let the person have it, But that was not how my mom always chose the road less traveled. And obviously, it affected quite a few people. And I'm grateful to have that and have her as my mother. What a wonderful person. Matthew 5:21 says, "You have heard it was said, if to those in ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother and sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to hell." Now that would be worth looking up. I believe the word there is Gehenna. And so you'd want to southwest of Jerusalem and what they mean by Gehenna. But it's not the fiery furnace that we've been raised to think. That comes from more of Dante's Inferno and lots of tradition. And I want you to think about that as well. A fire, yes. So when you are offering your gift to the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift, leave your sacrifice. First, go and be reconciled to your brother and sister. Then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court, because they don't want you to go to jail or lose all your money. But the idea is Jesus is upping the ante. Now this is more, Matthew is more of a Jewish Christian gospel. It's more, of a law. There's more law and more Judaism within this gospel. So it's very interesting to who this gospel was written to. But the interesting here, he's saying it's not just don't murder, it's don't hate, it's don't resent. If you have an issue with someone, make peace with them. And this is where the rubber hits the road. I mean, this is where it gets really hard. Here's the works that, if we're going to talk about works, the works we should probably be talking about is reconciliation and forgiveness, and not resenting one another, not having something against your neighbor. Unfortunately, it's usually the opposite. It's like, you should have something against your neighbor, and don't kill them, don't, but you got to go out, And this is saying, be reconciled to them. I want you to be reconciled before you give up sacrifice, before you start doing anything else, because that sacrifice, what happens is, like in Corinthians, just becomes a clanging cymbal. It's worthy, because without love, without the need of reconciliation, it's pointless. Jump over to me, if you will, to verse 5:43. "You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." So when you say, Jay, why do you talk so much about Palestine? And what about, what's happened? I do not support Hamas. I do not support the state of Israel right now as far as their military and their war and killing innocent children in these bombs. I think there has to be a ceasefire. I think both groups are horrifically misguided. So yes, there's that. People want me to say that, so I'm saying that to be clear. That, oh, well, aren't you just a little bit one-sided? Well, I'm like, well, it's a lot of Palestinian women and children and innocent bystanders that are being killed right now. There were a lot killed in Israel in 2023 and in the past, but there's a lot more of these innocent children and women right now being died, so I'm speaking out against that. But I think both of those lives are equally as important. If you have, there's neither Jew nor Gentile. You get this idea that these are all important people. We are all one with these people. These are our brothers and sisters. These are the folks we never give up on, never lose faith, always hopeful, endure through every circumstance. And as long as this horror exists, we must speak out against it, because we are called to love our enemies and do good to those. And I don't know how many people who I know, and I know lots of Christians who still support war and support this. For the first 300 years of Christianity, until Constantine came along, Christianity was a non-violent religion. It did not support war, would not serve in the war, would not serve in the military, would not do these things. Completely non-violent until Constantine came in and kind of took it over and mixed in with the politics. You see, politics and religion often, I once heard Tony Campolo say it's like mixing manure and ice cream. Unfortunately, it's all shit after that. So you've got this, we've got this thing where we're called to love our enemies and pray for them. And at this point, we don't even want to talk to them, and we have all these reasons that if they have these main reasons and beliefs against us, like a lot of the enemies of Dr. King. But Dr. King always saw the value of saying these people aren't the enemy. The message is the enemy. We want to see these people reconciled to the truth. So when he saw someone who was a racist and who hated him and hated his brothers and sisters, he said, this guy is not the enemy. I want to see this person come around. I want them to see the reason we need to be integrated. Yes, I want laws to protect us, because that's really what will protect us right now. But my hope is for this person to be restored and to come around. But if you don't have anybody to speak to them, to bring the good news to them, to tell this, because this could often be the good news. It's not just, I want to save you for Jesus, because that's what I thought it was all about. But I've realized as I've grown and grown mature, that's not what it's all about. What it's all about is saying, I want to see you restored as whole. I want to see you as a member of this family. I want to see you as a member of the community. I want to help free you from this hate and from this misguided anger. And you are a victim. You are a victim of hate. You are a victim of misinformation. You are a victim of fear, and I want to see you set free from that. And so that's why we love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. I love to pray for us who persecute us, because often people are like, well, I can't go back there. I'm like, okay, pray for them, but think about them. But try, Martin Luther King said, I'm grateful that Jesus said, love your enemies and not like them, because I can't like the things that my enemies do or the things that my enemies say, but I can love them because they are human beings and they are created in our image, and they are deserving of love as humans, as people who breathe in air. So you may also be children of your Father, blah, 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 blah. Jump to 46. For if you love those, now this is what I wanted to say again. Remember when I said, we often just say, well, it's easier for me to love people who are in my vision and my peripheral. I can maybe love this group, but everybody else, And he goes, but for if you love those who only love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do the same thing? And I love that, because Matthew, this book is called Matthew. Matthew was a tax collector. The way he goes and goes, come be my disciple. For if you love those who only love, what reward do you? Don't even tax collectors. And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, if you greet only those in your own clique or community or crew or tribe, if you only greet your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even Gentiles do the same? And then when he says, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect, you're telling me you want me to be as perfect as God? How is that possible? And he's saying, and I'm saying is this, I would say progress, not perfection, but what he's saying is it's when we love others, when we love our enemies, when we are able to recognize their humanity and maybe not like the way they believe, not like the way they treat us, not like the way they treat others that we care about, but we are able to love them for simply existing and being human beings, something powerful happens. That's when you won't be able to watch these wars and these things like this. You just can't, it just gets in your head and you go, I don't want to see this anymore. You don't get to pick and choose your battles all of a sudden. All of a sudden you're going like, man, I got to love a lot of people and I have to speak a lot of truth. And now all of a sudden people are mad at me because this one kind of steps on the toes of this one, and this kind of steps on the toes. You step on a lot of toes when you start really loving people and loving others and loving your enemies, because you also start to love other people's enemies as well. And that can become a very sticky thing, you know. That's why I think it's important to say, like, hey, I'm not saying I like what they do. I don't agree with what they do, but I do love them enough to know that, think that their reconciliation, their restoration is valuable. And remember, I said the grace, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. I think in Romans, somewhere in Romans, is what counts as faith. Faith expresses itself in love. Where's that verse where Jesus says at the Last Supper? Here we are on Easter Sunday. You know, at the Last Supper, he says to the disciples, "I want you to love each other, for your love for one another will be the example to the world that you belong to me, that you love each other." Is it broken record enough for you guys? So it's not the buildings. It's not having big church buildings. It's not church membership. It's not a community that goes to a building. It's not theology. It's not fame. It's not even money, believe it or not. You know, it's definitely not all of everybody being the same. It's not winning souls. That's what as I said, was told as a kid. It's not purity culture. It's not being woke or unwoke. You know, it's not virtue signaling. It's not memory verses, as I thought maybe in Bible camp it was about memory verses. You know, it's loving the other. It's loving your enemy. It's those are what we're called to do. It's faith expressing itself in love. It's not your politics, you know. It's not those things. Where is it? It's in Romans 37. Listen to this. So if we look at this kind of Galatians, that we're all one in Christ, that we're called to love our enemies, we're called to love our neighbors as ourselves, and this type of thing. If loving without love, we're only clanging cymbals, you know. So what does the love of God have for us? What is God's love? Because Paul Tillich said that love is the infinite which is given to the finite. Love, and God is infinite and we are the finite, but he believed that the essence of God was love, and that love is the infinite which is given to the finite. And what does that love look like? We've read before the "You Are Accepted" by Paul Tillich, which is a really beautiful talk. Oh, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I always forget to say that in the likes. But what is this love thing? No, and in Romans 8:35 it says, "Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all day long. We are accounted as the sheep to be slaughtered." Imagine being non-violent people and that happening to you. See, so when you think of non-violence, when you think of the civil rights things, when you think of social justice, this is part of it. This is Paul trying to encourage us that, hey, there's times when loving people like this is going to be a great cost. In 37, he goes, "No, in all these things we are more than conquerors." My mom loved this verse. I actually read it at her funeral. "No, in all things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced," now this is the love for us, "for I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord." This is what Paul's saying is the infinite, and it's given to us finite people. So we aren't clanging noises. So we might be doing great stuff. We might have 5,000 followers. We might be Mr. Beast, but he's saying it's just noise. If we see children dying and we just go, oh, you know, hope that works out. Don't want to get that on. Don't want to confuse people by talking about those folks suffering over there or those folks suffering over there. Hope that works out. We end up just being clanging noise, especially for those who suffer. And it's saying that this love that we're giving isn't just for us to give, but it's also the love which we receive by that which is greater than ourselves. That's why people often say broken vessels, because they're like, that love has to go through. And it was John 13:35 where Jesus says, love each other. I want to give you a new commandment. And he says, I want you to love each other because the world will know that you belong to me by your love for one another. There's things that I've read in Tillich where it's obvious that he believed that the only way to know someone has really followed God or has God is love. Not to claim it, not to go to church on Sunday, not to even say they're a Christian, but by love. That love was that only example. And right now our government really isn't showing that love. For some reason, churches often don't do that either. It's do what we tell you, kind of thing. And it's only for certain people. But it's all about love. It's tiring, to say the least. I'm tired. It wears me out. Because I have a lot of conversations with people saying, all right, well, you're loving this group. Are you still loving that group? What about that group? And what about this? And so you get these people calling you on that. And then you get other people saying, well, you can't love these people. Or we love this. We love our politician more than we love these people, or follow this Jesus. And you got to get yourself right. And you're just some sort of weird woke liberal, blah, blah, blah. And then I got another group saying, well, you're just, my progressive friends telling me I'm not progressive enough. Because I'm not just sticking to the rules there. You're not sticking to the rules here. But that's what love is going to do, is love is going to kind of make you a rebel, completely always rebelling against the systems. And that's why you need grace. I believe that's why grace is anarchy, because when you start to live with that type of grace and you start to live that type of grace, you do become kind of a bit of an anarchist, not maybe the political way, but you kind of become an anarchist amongst the others around you who kind of go like, well, I only can love so far. Or, well, if I've heard you say you love this, but and then you have to prove yourself that it really is, that you love these other people. And that gets tiring after a while. But it's also, sometimes for me, it's part of the work, is having to sit down and go, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, but let me tell you, this is what I believe. So that sometimes, and that really helps me sometimes, because I'm able to sit here and clarify it with you all. Unfortunately, usually the folks I'm saying it to here and clarifying it with you, the folks aren't listening to that. They're just watching my stories on Instagram and think, oh, he only loves this side, or loves it, I'm like, oh, listen to one of my talks, I said it there, I don't want to invest more than 35 seconds into your life, but I do want to hold you accountable to those 35 seconds. And that's part of where we're at in the world right now. So there's your broken record. There's the message for today. It does come a little bit out of Galatians just to remind us that we're one, and that we're going to live in that. And thank you, Hippie Christian. I will stay true to that message. I can do no other. Sometimes I'd really like to, but I can't. Maybe a time will come where everybody gets it and I can start talking about something else. Or just go on and do something else. But until that time, I shall be here. And I'm excited about the future of Revolution. I'm excited to have Brian on board. We seem to really work well together. And I'll be honest with you, Revolution is not a one-man show. It never has been. And when it is just me, it gets a lot harder to do, and a lot of things fall through the cracks. And, I'm starting to realize that I suffer from ADHD in a really heavy way. And it's taken me a long time to accept that, and to deal with that and face that, and that's part of it too. So when having people you can work together, it makes you stronger. So I'm grateful for that. As always, Revolution can use your support. You can make a tax deductible donation at revolutionchurch.com. We have Venmo and we have PayPal. To be completely transparent with you, I only got one paycheck this month, and I'm paying my rent late because all my work doesn't start until the end of this month. So I'm living right now on Revolution money, and enough is not coming in to kind of meet our bills and pay our bills. So we had to pay a bunch of our bills for the people who do all of our pay and write or do the paychecks and make sure all the taxes and stuff are pulled out, and who write all our other bills. And so we had to do all that stuff first. So we're not at a place where, so that's where I'm at right now. I'm kind of financially freaked out. I have done some work this week, other work this week, but it's just very sparse. And at the end of this month, I start doing a lot more. But that's where I'm at. But we can do more with your help, with your support. And with Brian Yarbrough now on board with us and doing this stuff, I think I've got a very, I know it's some cool and exciting stuff is going to happen. We got so much done. Just when we just sit down for an hour, we would get so much done. And it was just great to have that person around and to have somebody around who has the same excitement and joy about doing the tedious so we can do more love, more grace, more acceptance, and get the word and the message out there more. It's really exciting to have somebody on board right now who shares that passion with me. And man, in a perfect world, if we had $1 million, I'd go back and there'd be about 5 or 6 people I'd hire from the past, and we'd be cooking with oil. We'd be cooking and moving straight ahead. But right now we don't have that. But we do and need your support. Also, some of you helped give to my girlfriend had a GoFundMe because she had breast cancer, had to have a surgery, and it's been really tough on her. And she got insurance, but the insurance only gave her like $100 to live like a month and a half on, and she couldn't pay her bills. And so a lot of people gave to that. And thank you for doing that. That was just on my personal account, but some of you saw it and decided to step in. And there's all sorts of needs, but don't give what you can't. We'd much rather have you than your money. And we'd much rather have this message out there. No one here is trying to get rich. We're just trying to survive right now and do the best work we can and love the best we can and show much grace and try to spread it around as much as we can. And I hope we're doing that for you, and I hope you're doing that with others. So thank you so much for your love and your grace. Next week, same time, same channel. Be good. Bye-bye.